drop a message watching it, and I can ask Zach, or you can unmute. Definitely, if you're not asking a question, please mute. So we don't need background noise.
Perfect. All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Zach. I'm an education engineer over at Elasticsearch for the last 6 years. Salt Lake is actually an interesting spot because this is actually my first place I ever taught 6 years ago, which was a long time ago, and then taught for about 4 years, and then took 2 years off to sit at home and yell at the computer. So this is actually my first physical meetup slash public speaking I've done in 2 years. So if I stumble, please yell at me. So I'm excited about this. One of my passions is traveling, and I've been traveling about 15 to 17 states a year. And so I was doing virtual trainings from my camper, and I said, hey, let's start doing some meetups in different states. So they said, all right, what about Utah? I was like, okay, cool. I'll go to the Western Advance. And so here I am. This observability course is kind of broad in certain areas. If there is a focus, like some people said about machine learning, you want me to talk more directly about that, please feel free to ask some questions and I can dig in further on that. So without ado, we'll get going. But if you have any questions, want to have a discussion about any of the slides, please don't hesitate. One quick shameless promo before we get started. Elasticsearch training. We have a bunch of virtual trainings on everything you can think of, and we have a certificate that's out. If you take your engineering course, it takes about 4 days to complete. And we have a Kibana and an observability one. So we'll get going forward. And we'll start talking about Elasticsearch as a whole. Elasticsearch is a search technology. Let me see if I can drop a lot of this. Sorry.
Right hand side, you should be able to.
All right, we'll just drop it to the corner. Okay, in our average everyday life, we use Elasticsearch or search all over the place, right? So for instance, if you pull out your phone, I was just at a resort and this guy was like, hey, can you move photos over to my computer? And I said, you can't search over them, right? So every time I talk to anyone, I'll bring up a map, and I'll figure out where I was, and then I'll find those photos based upon date, timestamp, and location, right? That's very common nowadays, but even 2 years ago, that probably wouldn't have been a conversation we had. All right, so one of the reasons why a lot of people use Elasticsearch is for our scalability, speed, and relevancy. Quick question, who currently uses Elasticsearch? Raise your hand. Just curious on all the people out there. That's because we're a non-relational data store. Unlike SQL, we're going to be using a lot of nodes, a lot of shards, large scale, right? With large scale can come large speed, and then we try to get our most relevant documents possible, right? Doesn't matter if we're the biggest thing in the world, we can't give you the right data, might as well just go home, right? So if you've never seen Elasticsearch ever before, this is our stack. We're really focused on enterprise search, observability, and security, aka SIEM, right? I came from a SIEM world to start with. Never thought my whole life would be around logs, but here I am today, right? So we do have a large SIEM product out there. We'll be talking about the middle one, observability, okay? These bottom levels, this is how we're going to bring data in, either beats or Logstash. If you've been using a lot of Elasticsearch, you will understand that there's a big controversy between which one do I use. We can talk about that a little bit, but our main data store layer will be Elasticsearch, and since we all have bosses, they like to see pretty charts and graphs. Come on, right?
But we can't call it Belk anymore.
So I used to have a shirt that had a B. We used to call it Belk, and then we just came through a million different things. But can anyone guess what our first name, what Kibana used to be called? Way back in the day, I got hired right when they switched over the name.
I was gonna say, I think I actually used the first product because I started on 0.7.
Okay, what did they call it in
I
0.7?
can't remember. That was 10 years ago.
Marvel. They used to call it Marvel. Can you see where there might be a conflict of interest? So every time you spun up a node, we'd call it a different Marvel character. Fun fact. And then we used to call our overall UI Marvel. Disney took our first training, and they immediately wrote home. We changed the name immediately. Also, if you have any interest, you can go look at our GitHub. We actually erased one of the Marvel names because we found it offensive. So, fun fact, go look at GitHub, see which one we erased.
Zach,
Yep.
as you, there's the acronyms that some people are
Okay.
familiar with,
Yeah.
like SIEM.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As you unpack some of the acronyms.
Absolutely. So SIEM, fun fact is I used to always have a lot of shirts that said SIEM. I'm 6'3", 300 pounds, so I never got to wear any of these shirts. My girlfriend did at the time. And Security Information Event Management. All right. So try to remember that one. Yeah. Security event. It's SIEM. Yeah. SIEM. Right. Yeah. Security event. So either way, SIEM, we're not going with the name SIEM. We tried to go with the name SIEM. We said, nope. So we're a security side. I think that's a better thing to go about. Fun fact is the company I used to work for, they use Elasticsearch under the SIEM for their SIEM. Okay. And so it was kind of interesting. They put a head on top of their data storage, which was just Elasticsearch. They were not very happy when we said, okay, we're going to become a SIEM too, and charge no one money for that for a little while. So that was a great day for them. Good thing. I'll try not to do as many acronyms, but I mean it's so hard. Like everything is an acronym. I feel like deployment everywhere. This is huge. This is absolutely giant for us. Okay, if you're in our company, everything we talk about is cloud. Literally from the day we wake up to the day we go to bed, it's cloud. If we can't do it in cloud, we don't want to do it at all. Okay, that's becoming huge for our company. So Elastic Cloud, I'll show you some demos. We'll be on Elastic Cloud. You can do ECE, Elastic Cloud Enterprise. So if you want to bring your own hardware and then virtualize it and shell it out, you don't do it the ECE route. A good example of that, we have a talk from Canada Bank, British Canadian Bank, where they do ECE, right? They got tired of having all these different instances of Elasticsearch being charged. So they said, hey, we're going to put it under one roof. If somebody calls you from our bank, tell them we have Elasticsearch instance. And since we have to play with all the cool kids on the block, we now have fun, right? Support for full, Kubernetes. Please don't ask me anything about Kubernetes. I'm not a Kubernetes master. I just know enough to get in trouble. All right. So again, we offer this on Elastic Cloud. One of the great parts about Elastic Cloud is you just have to create a name. Literally, they made it that easy. Just create one name, and you can have your deployment up and running. Okay. Can you modify everything inside of Elastic Cloud? Yes. Probably don't want to do that because it takes you a lot of time and energy, but you can change resources, zones, all that fun stuff. And if you're in 7X, they have auto scaling, right? So now you don't even have to think about scaling. Elasticsearch will have feelers out there for disk, RAM, CPU, and then auto scale you. One downfall, we don't auto scale you down yet. So hopefully 9X, that might be a thing. But for big data, we don't ever scale down, right? Go forward. Any questions before we keep on keeping on? Okay. So observability, if anyone's not familiar with observability, usually is made up of these three pillars. Okay. So anyone's Nagios fan? Yeah. I used to have hair before I started working on Nagios at data center. But those are all separate things, right? You might have metrics in your Nagios, you might have logs, you might have APM, right? They were never combined together. Elasticsearch tries to take all these three things and make them look like they're one single thing, right? So human beings were made up of multiple different parts, but again, no one's like, oh, bones or hair, right? We're just like, oh, human being, right? And so we try to do that with Elasticsearch observability. Okay. Again, I'm trying not to do too many slides. We'll try to do more demos, but we're trying to bring in as much data as we can, automate as much as humanly possible, right? If you had to siphon through all your observability data, you need like 10 or 11 interns. We just don't have those resources. And then be able to look into your data, when something goes wrong, right? We want to be alerted and then be able to drill into massive amounts of data, right? How many of us have seen something go wrong and we have to go tail one single log, right? Yeah. See some shaking the heads like, oh, Jesus. Again, we try to make things scalable, right? Most of these devices out there are only going to keep on talking more and more to our Elasticsearch cluster, right? You did performance, right? So a lot of performance always brings in a ton of data. Usually before we had different teams for all these different things, right? If you had a company, you might have an APM team, you might have an uptime team, metrics team, a log team. Usually I see a lot of variation between this, right? From your application to your logs, two different human beings. Try to communicate. Well, we try to bring this under one single roof, okay? So when I show you a demo, we'll be able to jump between logs, metrics, events, alerting, everything else like that, okay? So if you were trying to run your company like this, you could. It's probably not as efficient, right? I tried that before. In our last SIEM company, we would always say, oh, we can look at logs, you can look at metrics, right? And no one got the full picture. In Elasticsearch, we try to have everyone on the same page, looking at the same stuff. Any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. First things first is always the biggest question. How the hell do I get my data in, right? Always. Everyone has such a big problem with this. As versions of Elasticsearch keep on continuing, we have support built in for native least supplied stuff, okay? So you see some different logging, you see different containers, all that fun stuff. Each one of these will give you easy access to how you're going to bring this into Elasticsearch and be able to test it, all right? Is this the end all be all with all the different devices? No, might have to go to GitHub, grab a few of those, but these are a great way to get started with any of your devices and keep on trying to get more and more devices in this list as humanly possible, okay? These devices are already broken apart into their own grok patterns. Anyone familiar with the word grok? Okay. Grok is like regex. Anyone familiar with the word regex? We're trying to split apart different messages. A message may contain, you know, a URL and then a date timestamp and then, you know, a response. Trying to break those apart. If I told you, hey, I have a router over there, please read in the logs, you'd be like, okay, I'm going to get the logs, now I have to parse them. Luckily, all of this is done with already supported devices. Okay. So here are our different components again. Beats, lightweight chipper. Okay. We're just trying to get data off of a device. You have a phone, tablet, Cisco router, whatever it is, get it, move it on. This has been kind of changed. We're now calling it fleet. A lot of people have heard the word fleet maybe. So if you start hearing the word beat and fleet, they're kind of intermixed together. Fleet has one other component to it, is it can talk back, okay? So it'll be more of a security control. And we have things like file beat, metric beat, packet beat, auto beat, right? File beat, we guess what that does? Collect and analyze files, right? Metrics, collect and analyze metrics, packet, audits, okay? These are very lightweight chippers. You can do some small processing it. So you can drop, you can do a modify, but you're not going to be doing a whole lot inside of here. Logstash has been around forever, right? Fun fact, we're the person that wrote most of Logstash. He actually lives in Salt Lake. Fun fact, Aaron, he's now a consultant. I don't know if he's still with us. He's been with us for a long time. But this is where we're going to normalize and filter our data. Anyone familiar with normalizing at all? The word normalizing? Cool. Yeah. So normalizing, if you come from like a SQL background, you're going to have, you know, tables that all match up together. Denormalizing or normalizing is going to take those and break those apart into fields that you can correlate. Okay. So like social security number would be a good field you can correlate between. For us, names, right? Name in this room would be an easy thing to correlate. Height, weight, all that fun stuff. Once we've done a lot of our processing, we can bring it to Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch also has an ingest node that can do a lot of processing, but this is where we're going to be able to scale up. This is where we're going to be able to just dump large amounts of data that we have or have not processed yet. Okay. And then last but not least, Kibana doesn't actually hold any data. It's just a viewing engine for us. Okay. So you can have one or you can have a million Kibanas, right? One of the police departments said, hey, we want 1,000 Kibanas. I said, fine. Okay, sure. There's 1,000. They all hooked up to Elasticsearch. Not a problem there. Any questions? I won't spend too much time on this slide. It's basically the exact same thing that we talked about, but our cool little logos. Go marketing. Woo. Anyways, this is kind of the whole big deal, right? We want it all. We want everything. Okay. We want any of our applications. We want any of our platforms, Windows, Linux. We want all the container information. We want all the different data store information, networking information, security devices, alerting, raw documents. This one's actually kind of interesting too. Does anyone know anything about Elasticsearch Enterprise? Enterprise Search at all? Nope. So that we bought a crawler way back in the day called SwiftType and converted that into Elasticsearch. One of the things that they are working heavily on is non-structured single documents like PDFs, right? So right now you can drop CSV, some unstructured stuff into Elasticsearch. But imagine if you had like a K1 document. Anyone familiar with a K1? It's a filing, but if you've ever read a K1, you're just like, what is happening here? There's graphs, charts, documents, and it'd be nice if you just take a PDF, whatever it is, and just dump it into Elasticsearch. Well, we're working on that with our crawler. I'm super excited about raw documents. It's one of the places that I'm most energetic about is either that or being able to just crawl sites, right? Super nice.
So you said unstructured on PDFs, but does it also do searchable PDFs?
Yeah, so we're trying to make it agnostic to the PDF, right? PDF format has always been fairly tough, even when we so we make ability to put dashboards on PDFs. I don't know if you've ever had an application where you try to do that yourself. Yeah, we just, again, like Nagios, so lost a lot of hair to that. PDFs are just very hard structures to work with, but I don't know, everyone puts it into that structure. So we're trying to make it so you can search a PDF if possible. Yeah, so that's another thing that's interesting is I don't know the full technology because we haven't fully released it. And when you're talking about coordinates on the page itself, yeah. So, so the interesting thing is you can actually take Google Slides and you can put them into Elasticsearch. So one of the things I did when I first started working with Elasticsearch about 6 years ago is you could take this whole slide and each element in Google Slides will give you like, this is the position X, Y, and Z. And so what I do is I diff all of our PDFs all the time. So then I could know if somebody made a change, yeah, ahead of time, yeah. But, so speaking of that, we have a company that does oil rig drilling. So they drill different oil rigs and they get these packets that are like this big full of data about the oil rig drilling. And they have to go in and figure out if they're gonna sign that document, right? And so they put it into Elasticsearch and they do find positioning. That's one of the things that they're looking for. And then they're looking for any areas where this data is different, right? So if the oil rig costs $2,000 for a pad, now it costs $5,000, they want to be alerted, right? Or if they use different naming conventions, if they split anything, right? If a line item is one line item, now it's two line items, yeah. So that's one of the hard part with this kind of unstructured data is definitely positioning will have to take place, right? But on a PDF, I don't know yet. Yeah, we are open source now, so that's a it depends question. Go ahead.
So some PDFs are just images. You'll see our.
Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know anything about if we're doing anything with image recognition. Maybe there's an open source about it. I just don't know that yet. We've worked with a customer that had voice recognition. That was kind of cool. They do movies. They fund all the different movies. and they have Elasticsearch. They hooked up voice recognition to it, so they can say how many movies were sold in X period. They tell you, kind of like, I'm not going to say the word or else it'll yell at me. But yeah, so that's an area where people put. Are we focusing a lot of energy on that? Not in the commercial aspect, but somewhat in the open source right now. Do I want to get there? Yes. And then sensors. Obviously, we like to do a lot of different sensors. I want to do a talk about a sensor soon. I think that's where I'm going to start focusing. I think tactile things, when you do meetups, is the way to go. So I want to do something where we build a sensor and put it to Elasticsearch. And then you can always build your own. Okay. And before I worked at Elasticsearch, this was my whole realm. I just built everything on my own. Because you can use bulk. You can bulk in anything you want into Elasticsearch. Okay. So we take unstructured payloads, like an XML file back in the day, didn't work well with Elasticsearch. So we put that in. Anyone, an INI file, a bunch of those, right, running around that you have to monitor. You can build your own structure if you want to. JSON in, JSON out, JSON everything. So it's up to you if you want to build your own. If you love the company you work for, build your own, because then they can never fire you. Go ahead.
What about ledgers or blockchain technologies?
Yeah.
Is that something?
I don't know. I don't know anything on that side. Yeah. I mean, how we work as a distributed system is similar to how blockchain technology works, right? Is that they have striping, or they have multiple legends, right? Ledgers that they communicate with, right? Same way Elasticsearch has multiple nodes and primary replica shards. But are we monitoring any of that stuff? I'm not in that arena. Does anyone work with blockchain or Bitcoin or?
I think you could easily take like the hacks, you could take the ledger itself, just turn it into a document type, search it. Yeah.
What's the original format it gives you back?
It's just a wide array, and
Okay.
what is in that depends on how you're putting it in there. So sort of structs that are used to put the data into it. But once you have access to it, you can.
Yeah, because Logstash has 64 encryptions, it has fingerprint analysis, it has a bunch of other tools. So depending on whatever format it is, I'd be curious, because I've watched some people, again, this is my whole knowledge of that, is I've watched people that dissect those wallets and they look into them and they try to figure out transactions, right? I don't know, I haven't looked in that arena for Elasticsearch, so it'd be interesting.
Yeah, it's because it's data within is just.
Yeah, it's massive.
Like everything's in NFT now.
Yeah.
Digest that.
I can guarantee you there's probably somebody bringing that into Elasticsearch. Yeah, and doing something with it. I personally don't go down that rabbit hole. I do love stocks, analyzing stocks through Elasticsearch. So I'm a big fan of that.
So,
What?
I don't know if you guys know this, but OpenSea, the largest NFT marketplace, just signed $100 million. So their entire marketplace, there's just search, and they're using us for observability as well. So the fact that we don't know a ton about it doesn't mean that it's
Yeah.
not, a big chunk of what we're doing. But our-
Oh, yeah. Depends on what encryption that they use. But yeah, that being said, Elasticsearch product is kind of like, I was 136 employee, and now what are you now? Yeah. So I can't keep track of all the different things that we do. I used to be able to. All right. We used to have just one conversation about Lucene, and then I'd say, okay. So, but we do a lot of stuff around different things. You talked about open source data, like Quandl. You can have Quandl. Anyone familiar with Quandl? They have ability for you to buy data, like stock information, different tiers of information that you bring into Elasticsearch. use natively. So I really enjoy that. Some data, some people that we like CoStar, I really wish I could get that data, but they're not handing that over anytime soon. Good question, Tom. Then again, we have, this slide's a little bit old, but we have some different modules that are out there. We have an open SDK too. But again, we have a lot of different device support. We have a ton of dashboards that are already pre-built. If you don't like to build dashboards, we already have them built in. 8x made this dashboard way easier. So I do a performance test every year. I do my taxes using Kibana. So I build a dashboard, I have multiple rental properties, figure out their cost benefit analysis, and I build it inside of Kibana. The first one I built took me all day to build, and then this last one took me 10 minutes in Elasticsearch because we now have copy clone and lens, which saves a ton of time. And you can build text and links without actually having to save it. Whew. I don't know if anyone saves stuff to the dashboard like a text. Just why would you save a text? All right, but it's become a lot faster.
So many rental properties, they have total gates of data.
I don't. Very small. Yeah. So, and how I exported it is I just go to my bank. They'll let me take a CSV. I dump that CSV in. I have a little script that erases last year's data, right? So I don't have overlapping data. And then I just pump it through there. Sometimes it makes me really happy, and sometimes I get really sad when I look at it. It depends. I bought one property in 2008. Thank you very much. Or 2010, actually.
There's a company called that you log into our bank account.
Yeah, so I tried using Mint to let me export some of that data. And now I have it hooked up in real time. I actually pull and then I put in real time, which is pretty nice. I did some analysis and I actually figured out Airbnb wasn't making me more money, which is a fun fact. I would get a whole lot. Yeah, it didn't. So with long-term rental and Airbnb, after paying the housekeeper, the host, all that stuff, the licensing, the pain in the butt, it was just, I look at it and I was like, nope, not bringing enough money. So I squashed it out. So there's good analysis, like using real life data. So I always like to do that. I also have a retirement calculator in Kibana of when I'm going to retire. So that's always fun. Lately, I've been looking at that number. It makes you depressed, so I don't look at that dashboard as often anymore. But again, we have things like machine learning, where we can view, analyze that. We have a whole section on machine learning that are out there. And then we have logs. We have a built-in log tailing system, which is great. For the longest time, we did not have that. That was crazy. Everyone made third-party logging systems for Elasticsearch. And now we have a robust logging system. And I'll show you a demo about that. This one's kind of nice. We always call it the waffle. And this will take your different machines and you can do analysis on which machines might be down. And then you can jump right into different visualizations of CPU, disk, memory, RAM, all that fun stuff, right? So this is, if you go back here, I wish I could pause it for a second. You can take this top level and decide what you want to do. So we have a lot of customers that have racks. They have rack A, rack B, rack C, right, with a whole bunch of waffles. And they could even put different views here. So if you want to do view 1 through 42, if anyone remembers those days, rack and stack ones, that's where I got all the muscle from, moving servers all day long. And then you can look at their metrics and any related information. But all this information uses Elastic Common Schema. Okay, and if you use Elastic Common Schema, you can go between metrics, logs, discovery, everywhere, and it should work flawless. Okay, sometimes if you build your own names, you might have issues. Okay, so we call things like host.origin, host.whatever. So you probably want to stick with our nomenclature. Okay, we do have Canvas. Anyone familiar with Canvas? Canvas is our approach on taking like a slideshow, making it visually active. Okay. Pros and cons about that. I think I'm going to say I think Canvas will no longer be a thing in the future. I think our dashboards are going to take over and make prettier dashboards. I've had to deal with a lot of customers that are like, yeah, I want to build all these visualizations. And instead of calling consultants, they call trainers. I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, what is that hex code for purple, blue? All right. And then I'm building out this dashboard that they use one time. I'm like, cool, all right, good to do that. So honestly, I think it's a great element. It's very customizable, but unless you're a designer, it's really, really difficult. Okay, my opinion. I built a lot of beautiful dashboards in the past, and they're wonderful marketing material, and they can be exported to your website very easily. But again, they're very hard to build just visually. Okay, they can use all the same elements. So any lens, mapping, all that fun stuff you can put inside here. Okay, so every year I tried to make a canvas of my rental property, and I just gave up. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'll just build a dashboard and call it a day. All right.
They're good for socks and knocks. If you have big,
Yeah.
if you have big screens and you want to put things on screens so that people will see something as it happens, that's what they're really good.
Yeah.
There are many ways to visualize data. And Canvas is really one aspect of doing it. That's what I've seen.
Yeah.
They can just have big metrics, big flashing, lights if something goes wrong. It's also something that when their boss walks in, it's the only thing they look at.
And that is 100% true. We have clients that have it right when you walk into their lobby, kind of how like Facebook has that little arrow where everyone uses it. Yeah, so we have clients that use it. Again, it's going to take you a lot more time to build those visualization elements out. That's why I think Canvas will be merged with Dashboard. Dashboard will just become prettier, less tactile. So again, it doesn't matter where you're at, if you're in logging, metrics, or APM, we want to be able to jump between all these things, okay? Does not matter. If you use the common schema names, you should be able to click errors, take you to log, right? You should be able to hit a metric, be able to take you to uptime, okay? So it doesn't matter where you're at inside here. Again, we have things like uptime. Uptime is great, right? Because it tells you what systems are down or up. That doesn't even have to be a system. It could be a device, could be anything, right? You could hook that up to whatever you care to do, and you can monitor it. I had somebody that came into one of our classes and they hooked up their router to it. So when their kids' friends came over, they would see all these different all these different devices and monitor them that way. I'm not saying you should if you have kids, but you could monitor your kids using Uptime. And then again, machine learning. We're going to take these different algorithms and figure out. Yep, go ahead.
Scott had a scan for you. So go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, hey, sorry for the interruption. Just wanted to let you guys know that when somebody who's in the room there asks a question, we really can't hear it. And maybe Zachary, if you don't mind repeating the question when it gets asked. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I forgot it. First time presenting in 2 years. I forgot about that. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. Most of the questions so far have been how good I am as a presenter. So machine learning, though, anomaly detection, right? We have a whole course on machine learning that's out there. I'm fairly good at machine learning. I'm not an expert at machine learning. I'll just say that ahead of time. But really what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to correlate different aspects of your data, right? Do some forecasting. The interesting part about machine learning, the more data, the more accurate we can be with your data. Okay, so if we're going to do forecasting, you just give me a week's worth of data, good luck, right? So machine learning really works if I have a large historical amount of data, but it's nice for finding different anomaly detections that might be out there, not just spikes of data. We do relevancy accordingly too. So how important is this on your system, right? If we see a spike once, is that really important or is it not? And we'll show you a couple of different things machine learning. Next one, alerting, right? We want to fire off some event if something happens, right? If we get over 90% disk space, we have a client that logs in for X duration of time. We might want to send out a Slack message, email, whatever else. We might want to do some resolution too. That's what Fleet's all about, be able to stop report or do whatever else you choose to do. And again, you can report any of those alerts that happen. questions, concerns, comments? This one's, I'll do it fairly quickly, but it's big feature functionality of Elasticsearch is we have the ability to move them between nodes, take searchable snapshots, which if you haven't looked up searchable snapshots, definitely do that. It saves you a bunch of money because you can take a snapshot but still search over it. Awesome. And then this whole structure is kind of like every human being. We're born, we go to middle school, high school, college, right? Get married, divorce, married, divorce, married, divorce, work, and die, right? Being facetious. Forget I'm in Utah. Everyone just gets married and never gets divorced. Yeah, so, but it's the same way with your data, right? Data you bring in today might not be important tomorrow, might be important in 3 weeks. So how are you going to mitigate your data as it goes in? Because if I give you data and I'm your boss, I'm assuming it's going to be hot forever. I'm assuming you're going to put in something that 10 years down the road, I can be like, hey, remember that time I gave you that data? So make sure that you use a good ILM policy so you don't run into those issues. We also have ability to roll up. So we can take our data and we can mitigate some of the data points to it. Just imagine Zillow, for instance, they have price point on your house every second, basically, but they can roll up that data and say, okay, I really don't care about every single day. How about we do every month? What does that data point look like? You can do average, min, max sums of those data points, okay? So that really helps you mitigate some of your performance data, right? Because when you do performance testing, you might have tons and tons of data points, and you might want to get rid of a few of those. This is an old slide that doesn't exist anymore, so I'm not going to reference that. Elastic Common Schema. I said this word like 5 times now. It's not important. If you were playing drinking game, I know we're in Utah, we don't have any beer. It's going to be using common fields. Okay. This is pretty important. If you start with a startup or your own team, you will make up names. Your coworker will make up a completely different name than you, and you will have conflicts in the future. The only way to solve those conflicts is by an alias. And you don't want to have a whole bunch of aliases in your system because you guys couldn't agree on a name. All right. So create good nomenclature to start with. Here's the whole system as a whole. You have all your beats. You can send that over to Kafka or message in queue. We send that over to Elasticsearch. There has been a talk in the future about us making one of these. We're not going to do that. There's good message queues out there. We like them. Kafka is one of them. And then we push everything to Elasticsearch into Kibana. You might see here that APM requires its own APM server. Does anyone play with APM at all? Application performance monitoring. Some people get really confused because they're like, what? Why do I have an APM server that's out there? Well, let's say you're buying stuff off of Amazon, right? Amazon could have hundreds of millions of different transactions, okay? And they will correlate together. They'll say, okay, this is a shopping cart transaction. 94% of people did this during that transaction, okay? If you had to collect every single one of them uniquely, you would blow up any device that you're trying to collect from, okay? So it's going to take different sample sets, and it's going to take the different network operations that are happening to make those stack traces, combine them together and send them over to Elasticsearch. Okay, so APM server is going to be doing all the work of stitching that together. See some confused looks at it.
Is that serverless?
Is that serverless? So you could build it on any kind of virtual environment you want. You just have to have the resources to do so. Okay. Wait a second. So if I told you you need the resources to do that, what might be a good idea to hook on to this thing? Yeah, observability. I might want to look at metrics, heartbeat, and maybe Oddbeat, right? So I might want to hook up a couple of these beats to my APM server. Surprise, surprise, if you're in cloud, you enable monitoring, it doesn't affect you. So, good for us. Yeah, we monitor our own devices. Any questions, concerns, comments about that? But you want to keep track of your APM server, make sure you're not running out of memory, CPU, all that fun stuff. But yeah, you can virtualize it however you want, or you can make it a physical box. Up to you. Security, we're not going to go crazy into security, but again, we have built-in third-party LDAP Active Directory. You can build your own custom. I won't lie, this security side is where you start getting into paid versions. If you want to do awesome security stuff, somebody has to pay my salary. So that's kind of where the line is. Honestly, we're not the first people to do that. Pretty much every big data, it's like, oh, you want security? Pay us. All right. But luckily, a lot of security is now open source. That was a big move in 5X, right? Everyone was getting hacked. And so our CEO was like, okay, just give basic authentication. But if you want to do LDAP, Active Directory, you're going to do that. But now we also mandatory TLS and SSL encryption. Okay, mandatory. We won't start Elasticsearch without this. That's the login. Kind of already talked about alerting. I'm going to just get into a demo. I'm just passing a few of these. Again, we'll try to look for different behavioral aspects. Slide to that. Okay. We're just going to get into it. I think this was designed for like an hour and a half. So, are you guys okay with the demo? Less slide, more demo. All right, let me get out of this. So one of the first things if you're brand new to Elasticsearch, never started Elasticsearch ever in your life, go elastic.co, do a login. You'll see my email for a hot second. Feel free to write me an email. I never read it. That's Pat. All right, I have way too many deployments. One day Elasticsearch is going to find out, yell at me, but till that point, you can see I have different versions. And since I travel all the time, I'm all over the globe. So I have no clue where I'm going to be at. Super easy. If you've never started Elasticsearch at all, you can do a 14-day free trial. I would highly suggest just doing a 14-day free trial, even if you have Elasticsearch. We have I taught the government this last week for a whole week. And I was like, just go, because they can't have, government protocols. So they can individually create their own deployment, 14 days, just try out the new functionality and features. So if I click deployment, all I need to do is have a name. That's it. Maybe a little bit of money on the side, but you can do a 14-day free trial. But that's all you need to do. You can pick the different provider you want, depending on who you want to. Surprise, surprise, we picked Google. AWS tried to steal our software. And then our different sizes. Again, you can go real advanced in this. Like we can talk about master nodes, a coordinating node, machine learning nodes, all that fun stuff. If you're really interested in that, I would highly recommend taking a couple of our courses. Thank you, Martha. All right, so let me come to my personal deployment. Okay, and I could easily go to Elasticsearch, APM, Fleet, or Enterprise Search. I'm actually going to come over to this one. Actually, one last thing to note. Let me go back. Let me just open up Kibana real quick. Two places that you really want to go to as soon as you bring up a cluster. Give it a second. I don't know what this Wi-Fi is like. Probably should have cached something before I started here. Did I lose connection at all? Do you think they're blocking ports on their open?
Possible. It's a guest Wi-Fi network, so it's a good chance they could be blocked.
Let me try this. All right, this one works. All right, so they're going to block all my ports. Fun fact, I forgot all about this. I have a wireless router in the car just for this, but usually demo.elastic.co will let me go through. So I'm going to do most of my demo through there. If you come over here, the most important thing that you first do is come over to this try sample data set and just put in our e-commerce flight and log data. Okay. The hardest thing in life is getting started, right? So just bring in these 2 data sets, or sorry, 3 data sets, and you'll have dashboard, canvases, graph, machine learning ready to go. Okay. So you don't have to do anything other than make a deployment, add these 3 data sets, and you can get rid of them at any time if you're like, okay, I'm done with that. I've learned what I want to do. Next important part that I would highly suggest is come over to this ingest and look at all of the different components that you have. Okay, so you have some Azure, Go, Elastic Stack. If you come over into monitoring, you Cassandra, and then each one of these will give you an overview of how to bring in said log or said device. Okay, a lot of them have code snippets, and then they also have all the different nomenclature, right? Elastic Common Schema. Take a drink. I said it again. But as you can see here, we have 285, right? That's significant from what it was just even a year ago for our different devices. So if I type in let's do like Mongo or Nginx is pretty good. Let me go to Nginx. See a whole bunch of different information about that, all the different log sources, and then how we get started with it. Great. I think there's, if you go to the top, okay, I'll tell you the different version control, and then all you need to do is add it. Fortunately, I'm on the demo, so I can't add it. But if you click that button, it'll tell you how to add your different things. So this is just the overview. To add it, go to there. You'll see like a snapshot of all the different visualizations that are correlated. And then one more stop, sorry, upload a file. Okay, it does have a max out at 100 megabytes by default. You can change that in your advanced settings to 1 gigabyte. Okay, if you have more than 1 gigabyte, just break it apart into multiple. Are they going to make that bigger in the future? Maybe, I don't know. But it supports for CSV, TSV, JSON. Okay. So once you bring your data in, then you have all access to this thing called observability. Okay, you go to the overview of observability. It'll show you any alerts, event logs, host, services, monitoring, user experience, and then anything that's new. Okay. So this is just your generic overview of everything, okay? And then over here, you can see all of the different things like logs, metrics, APM, uptime, and user experience, okay? User experience is new, like we're just introducing that. That's the ability to have synthetic searching, right? Have a website that we go to and we do searching for you and then put that data into Elasticsearch, so that we can give you a look and feel of what your website feels like to other human beings. Again, we have any alerts that take place. We have any cases that have been fired off. We have all of our different logs here. Okay, we'll load those up. We have that based upon the last day. And then you can see here that we have these different time pickers. And yes, in your advanced settings, you can change your browser to a different time range. So if these are logs in Tokyo, say you're in Tokyo, right? That's always been a hard thing to try to do that time days. But we also have search everywhere. So if you have a certain host log file that you want to look for, if you have a certain region you want to look for, if you have a certain name, certain field, you can go ahead and have IntelliSense for that, okay? Great way to start looking at logs. And then if you click right here, you can view detail or view context. View detail will show you one single record. View context will take you out of tail of everything and just bring you to that individual log file that created this, right? So if the machine restarts, you want to go to that single log file that caused that issue, right? You can go directly to view context. You can see any anomalies if you do those in different categories. We haven't set up any of those. Metrics. We can load any of our metrics up. You can see all of our different devices in a waffle formation. One of the things that you can do is you can show the different hosts that are there, what they're running on. You can load things up by CPU or log rates, right? If you wanted to change what your waffle is now organized under. You can now group it too if you want to do availability zones. So I'm looking at log rate by availability zones, right? So the top one will show me availability zones. I can click into it and I can get more grain detail on that. Okay. Remember, I can search anywhere. So if I click one of these, I can go directly into metrics about it, logs about it, processing, metadata, anomalies. Okay. Or if I hook this device up, maybe it's running APM or Uptime, I can jump directly into that. Okay. So the whole idea is if you want to take a log, go to a metric, go to APM, we don't care. Just let you jump wherever you please. All right. So I can come directly into these logs, look at one of these and say, you know what, I want to run a filter or I want to open it directly in the log itself. Okay. Just open that as page. And then I can always change my time frame related to that. There's also the Metrics Explorer, which is nice, and I can grab the different metrics related to this. Okay, so if I have a device, I can always grab these different metrics. I can see them. Okay, APM is massive. Okay, I teach a whole week's-long course on APM, and so doing this in 5 minutes is going to be quite interesting. But you have all your different devices from your APM. And if you click one of your devices, you can see latency over time. Very cool, right? That's probably an area. Latency and throughput is pretty much my world. And then you can see different transactions. These are native transactions, right? So we will look inside your library and determine what transactions are happening. You can create your own transaction if you want. If you have your own individual span that you want to look for, you can go ahead and do that. You can see the failure rates, and you can see if we handle those failures or not. So handle failures, right? The application still keeps chugging along. Unhandled failures means users are very upset. We'll give you a call. You can see all the different errors. You can see the different time span of what we're doing. Large amount of it is HTTP. And you can see all of the different dependencies it's using and their impact. So I can see here that this APM is really using Python quite heavily. And then I can see where the instance of it is running. Also, since I can denote using any of the, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, you have average for latency.
Yeah, we can do 90. So the question was, can we change latency? And we can do it in the 90th, 95 percentile. I wish there was a little bit more options there, but that is what. Yeah, good question though. And then we can see our transactions. Okay. And again, it's showing me average, if I can change that, see my different throughput, and then I can see my different data related to this. Fun fact, this is an index in Elasticsearch. It's called .apm blah, 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 blah. So all this data and graph and charts, you can get as JSON format, okay? So you can actually, I wonder if I can do that here. I'll show you at the end, but you can grab any dot notation. If I was on my own systems, I could probably see it easier. I don't know if this will allow me to get into that fine grained detail or if they block that because it's a demo machine. You can see any of the dependencies here, okay, their latency, their impact. You can do any kind of filtering that you want. You can see the errors and how often they occur. You can actually click into one of them and you can actually see, since we're grabbing straight from the application itself, we can see any of the log files or libraries, and sometimes you can see the exact syntax inside of there. To go ahead and change that. Okay, you can see any metadata. A lot of people will put, the further you get into APM, they'll add metadata in here. Obviously like users, right? If somebody is causing a lot of trouble. Usually there's one person that's just putting nonsense into fields that they shouldn't be. That's pretty easy to correlate. And since we're running metrics, we can see all the metrics on this system, and we can see a service map of everything, all the different applications that are communicating with, right? And we can jump directly into one. So if we want to go to Postgres, we can look at the latency, and then I can look at straight details of Postgres. Okay, find out if there's any issues with Postgres that's happened. All right, last one, uptime. I can see all of my different devices, and if they're up or down, I can see if they have any TSL certifications that are expiring. That's good, right? Who remembers those? I never do until they expire. Downtime history, and then you can set alert if you wanted to, and you can test it if you choose to. And then if you want to, you can jump into that individual device, and you can see how many times we tried to ping it, monitor it, right? And then if it came back up or down, and then we can see information about it. Is it giving me a certain response code? And if you wanted to, you can add a location, right? If this is running Kubernetes, AWS, somewhere else, then you could jump to that and figure out if there's any logs that correlate with that, you know? So, and then last but not least, I don't know if we have anything for user experience. It's loading up the dashboard. Let that load. Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna, yeah. Oh, snap. To that effect, let me see if I have one last thing I want to show. Here's the dashboard, by the way. It's just going to show page loads, page views. I'm having some trouble here with it. Let me see if I can go to dashboard. Perfect. Let me see. So let me see if I can click it. So this is a standard dashboard. I can look at other dashboards, but did you see how I had a problem with loading that dashboard in front of you guys? I was scared it wouldn't load. On normal dashboards, we added searchable session state now. Okay. So when a dashboard loads, you can actually hit it and save it for a later period of time. Okay. I'll keep that date correlation. So this works great now for like demos. When I go to teach a class, I can just say, save that session. It has an expiration. Usually it's about 7 days, and then I'll get rid of it. But the great part is if you have huge dashboards with maps and tons of visualizations that take a long time to render, and then you have to do that in this room or a room that has Wi-Fi or terrible Wi-Fi, you can save that session, which is extremely nice. So we're trying to do a lot more stuff in Elasticsearch with lazy loading, and if you have low bandwidth, start with. All right, I'm gonna leave it up to some questions. Covered a lot in a small duration of time. All right, we got a question in the back?
So like, just kind of industry use cases that, like, I can see this is a pretty powerful tool on cybersecurity. You mentioned SIEM initially, but is this one industry that is everything you show as far as like, I can see this being, you know, certain instances that it's compromised, state that possibly take it, is that something?
Yeah, so that'll be, so if you come in here, I wonder if this is enabled by default. You actually come into security. We have basically some of these same tools, but used differently in security realm itself. Okay. We actually have its own query language. So the up top, I was looking at host, whatever. It uses EQL so it can do chaining of different events, which is really nice. So observability is good for generic stuff. If you're going to do more security stuff like mitigating hosts and finding attacks, I would definitely use the security side of this. Okay. So the question was, this looks like it's a pretty good tool to use for security purposes. And the answer to that is it is, but we actually have a whole security realm that we deal with mitigating security risk with. Okay. So one of the most powerful parts about our security infrastructure is the ability to do recipes. Okay. So if you've looked at any of our publishings, we'll say we have Elasticon and schema, right? Drink again, with the same names. And we'll say, hey, we found these anomalies. If this host and this host and this action happens, you have an attack, right? And we can give that recipe out to our clients. And we can just say, hey, plug in this recipe. And if you see that in your environment, most likely you've been compromised or you have some issues, right? So that's a real differentiating fact between observability, because we don't have that recipe per se, right? We have recipes on like overusage of disk space or, standard system stuff, where we're not looking for those anomalies of users coming in and doing something malicious. So we really tried to split these three realms. Is there some overlap? Absolutely, because they're going to use metric, events, loggings, all the same input. You're going to use the same input, but the results will be two different things. I wish I could get into the security side with just some. We have a 2-week course on security if you're interested. We actually do a in-physical training on security too. We use Bro and Seek and all those other things. We actually acquired a company named Perch, and they now run all of our security training. And so, because they all have those clearances that I will have. Fun fact, my dad and my grandpa both worked in nuclear facilities, have high level of clearance. I don't, but I glow in the dark now, so that's a positive. Yeah, but definitely. Do you have any other questions directly towards security?
No, just, that things had some, having worked with CrowdStrike in the past, there's a lot of similarities with dashboards.
Yeah.
With the overall layout. There's another company out there called Alvic, which does a lot of network monitoring. So that pulled up that little graph that showed.
Yeah.
That's pretty spot on with that.
I think we all steal from each other quite a bit too. Yeah. Pretty much.
One of the challenges on the security side, though, is the data isn't always JSON.
True. We will. The question is, if it's not in JSON format, is that tricky for Elasticsearch and Kibana? And the answer is we change all data to JSON, and we change all dates to EBSCO milliseconds. So that's another thing that just be prepared for, because date times are always hard, no matter where you're at. But we can pretty much take any format, even if it's binary, and change it into JSON. Images are a little bit harder, though. I'll give you that. Yeah, I don't know it. I couldn't talk enough about that. Yeah, I know. As long as it's not XML, thank God. And you'll get quite used to. Let me see if I can go into dev tools real quick. Yeah, so like you'll see most of our stuff. Let's see if I can do a search. You'll see all of our stuff comes back as JSON format, right? But we have a lot of IntelliSense. Again, this is not a dev tools, but I could do a search and then write a query. I could do a bool query, and I could do different aggregations and do different highlighting.
Did you just do that?
Oh, snap. I didn't even see that.
You're still on here, just fine.
Is it that music that just plays when I had to leave?
I bet you the room has a shot.
Oh, there we go.
I just had to get up and walk around.
Yeah. But yeah, you can see here that this JSON format here, we have IP addresses, we have geolocations, we can have binary in here, we can support all kinds of data in JSON format. Now, how do you manipulate that JSON format into pipelines, all that fun stuff? Come take training with me, do it virtually or physically. Oh, we don't have a physical class yet, but someday we will. So, yeah, any questions, concerns? In the back.
I mean, the tool's meant for like managing and monitoring
So I'm curious, like, do you ever use it for like root cause analysis, like I don't know, something happened? And you're kind of able to kind of, I guess, identify that or not necessarily, that's the.
Yeah. So the question was, we bring in a lot of different devices, but the main question was around root cause analysis and looking into maybe one individual host related to that. And I would say, yes, again, the SIEM product that we use, we can correlate different hosts. Okay. So you can come into like a record. This is like the JSON format, right? And each document will have, let's say each log would be in a document. They would add different fields in here that might say attacker level high, right? And so when you go and look at that log, you can correlate things, like you can add tags now in Elasticsearch. So you could say potential issue, and then you could also flag each individual one of these. And in security, you can do chaining, that's really what we want to do. And you can look at timelines differently because they have a timeline layout where it can show, okay, this person came in with this IP, what all, like, so kind of like how APM has a span of, what is all connected, but that you can see from this user, where did they go in your environment, right? Yeah. So it sounds like we just need to have a security meetup. Would you guys be interested in that?
I can get you in contact with the security group.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, if you would, can we do this virtual at all? Virtual presentator?
Oh, yeah, I can absolutely.
Okay. Because yeah, link up with me. I know a lot of the Perch guys, but I don't think any of them live near Salt Lake.
What's the painless lab data?
Oh, painless lab data. Jesus, I should have hit this before I had a chance. So here it is. Oh, it's going to give me an error on this. But is anyone familiar with painless? Okay, painless is our script. So the question was, what is this painless lab? And I tried to not answer that question. And the question is that we used to allow any scripting in Elasticsearch. Okay, anything. Wild West. It's the greatest days. It's the greatest days. Yeah. So depending on who you talk, it was the best days in the world. It was the worst days. Because if you got hacked using Go or anything, it sucked. So we said we had to get rid of this. We're a real product. We had 12 people maybe on the team. So we're like, okay, we made our first $1. We need to do something about it. So we took out scripting. We only allowed one language in, which is technically Java, but we've stripped Java libraries out. Okay. We only gave this to one individual person. Again, we didn't have a marketing team. We didn't have anything. We gave it to one person. That person hurt their back during this process. And he didn't know which one was more painful, stripping Java or his back. And so he put painless because no manager told him what to name it. And it's been sticking with us ever since. Okay. So it uses Java. Okay. Our scripting language is basically Java that we ripped apart different components. Like you will not find an HTTP library ever in painless, right? We won't make a communication with that. That being said, if you know Java, you will be very comfortable in painless. If you're like me and you have a million Microsoft certifications for C#, you will look at it and be like, oh, dear God, what is this happening to my life, right? Yeah, so it depends on what language you are. But good news is some of the machine learning libraries that are out there for Elasticsearch only use Python, okay? So there are some machine learning that you can bring in that only use Python. And I feel like that's the crack open into the door of maybe making Python as our default scripting language instead of painless. But again, it'll be some version of
Like the rest of the plan.
yeah. So the problem is we're always going to be chasing the tail, right? It's always going to be the next thing. So if it's not Java, and I think the reason we picked Java is we natively develop in Java and it's widely used. It's not the newest hotness thing, right? I voted for C#. No one listened to me, but our PowerShell, I'd be down with this with PowerShell. But yeah, so you can use this. What I hate about this, and I'm very honest, 6 years here, they're not going to fire me tomorrow. So I love this company, by the way. I think Elasticsearch is great. I wouldn't work for anyone else. I started working for this company long time ago. I said, this is cool stuff. I want to do this. But one of the hard parts with Painless is they don't give you great examples. And we've been really working with the teams to try to create not these crazy examples, but something like, how do I concatenate something? How do I time something? You know what I mean? And so Painless will allow you to do that. We now have runtime fields that use Painless, which is great. So if you want to make up a field and do your own math equation to that field, you can go ahead and do that, and it won't be stored in the inverted index. Yeah. So URLs, for instance, that's a pretty good one. So the question in the back one day was asked about finding potential threats. So some people use Painless to make a URL that goes to a third-party tool that does, some of their security analysis, so that you could write in here, HTTP blah 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 blah, and then create some kind of parameter to go to the third party. So some people use Painless to create URLs or scripts that run that. Good question. Any other questions, concerns, comments? All good questions. I feel like you're itching to say one more. Go ahead.
I guess with people that have shown interest, I guess what's the timeline from them, I guess, interacting with you guys and the sales team to like implementation?
Do you want to answer that question?
Repeat the question.
All right, we'll repeat the question. So the different time, I can answer this question too if you want me to. The question is, between getting to know Elasticsearch and interacting with salespeople to implementation, what does that look like? And I was being cheeky. I was going to send it to one of my colleagues that's only been here for 30 days because I'm on the training side, but we do talk with a lot of sales engineers, other things like that. And it can widely depend, okay? So my last company, I used our open source software for 2.5 years. Frankenstein everything I could until they were like, can you do this? And I was like, oh, yeah. And I gave them a price estimate of how much my hourly rate is. And then they looked at a license and I said, no, we're going with the license. So eventually, sometimes your company will just lose out to headcount versus license, right? But what we try to do is Elasticsearch is open source, is free. So if you come over to subscriptions, Elastic.co, and you look inside of here, you can see we have a whole, like this is the basic and free. Free and basic are basically the same thing. You just got to give us an email. Doesn't have to be your email. But you can see here, we have a ton of free features, okay? And Shai, our owner, really, that's the main focus, that he was like, I really want people to use Elasticsearch, like Elasticsearch, and then just make that decision to move on forward. So I'm a big component of that. The first thing I did when I asked Elasticsearch, when I started hiring, I said, hey, are you ever gonna node cap us? And he goes, no, I'm never gonna node cap. And because I came from Zen, anyone familiar with Zen or Hyper-V? These are all virtualization platforms, and they always, like, after 3 nodes, they cap you. And I was like, we can't do anything with these 3 nodes. So I said, are we gonna cap on nodes? And he said, no, we will cap on certain features. And I said, that's fine, because some of these I can work around, right? JSON in, JSON out. I know how to mitigate some of these. And then 2, if I want to build my own security, I can. It's open source. I can get in that code. We have people write their own security all day long. Does it work perfect? I don't know. But so it depends on who you are as a client, right? If you're a Fortune 500 company, I'm sure we have a salesperson that has your name and number and when you eat breakfast. But individually, I think it really depends. That being said, I know there is a gap that we're trying to really mitigate with cloud. And that gap, when I first started working, was small customers. We had a huge gap, and constantly small customers would say, hey, I don't want to pay this much for your licensing on physical servers because it's too high, right? And that's why we moved to a cloud infrastructure that we can lower down that price. So the last 4 years have been great for middle to small tier companies that didn't have those, government $1 billion contracts. But I think the real point of that was that We just didn't have the resources. We were targeting those larger companies like any small company does, right? Go after the big money.
The last, to speak from the customer side of that sort of thing, the last two companies that I've worked with Elasticsearch in, we didn't even have Elasticsearch licenses or contracts. I mean, the first one, we didn't have it for 5 or 6 years before we ever even said we'd like support. We did it all ourselves. Then again, one of the guys wrote the book on Elasticsearch, literally one of the training books, but the second company.
Was it Lee et al?
What?
Was it Lee et al?
No, it was Abhishek. He wrote
Okay.
a learning Elasticsearch book on it. The second company, we did kind of quickly pick up a management contract sort of thing that was more manage the cloud side of things, that sort of stuff. So you can absolutely, I mean, usually the first entry for us in Elasticsearch was always just get out and do it. Just start using it, building it, doing things with it. And then you would come along and say, okay, do I need to talk to Elastic and get some further? So
You don't even have to create an account with Elastic.
yeah.
You can literally go find walkthroughs, pull down containers, and start using Elasticsearch. And it is a challenge for us at Elastic because we don't know who all our customers are, because there are so many customers come through the open source recipe wrap. You know, just we're using Docker, spin up instances. Gartner just released a report, and Gartner said, I don't buy the number, but this is Gartner that said 90% of all search bars on the web, if it's not Google, it's Elastic. Yeah. And when you see the logo slide of everybody that uses Elastic, Elastic is everywhere in enterprise search.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about today is observability. I mean, that it turns out that the same technology you use to implement enterprise search works really good across log files, works really good across application metrics, tracing, security, and all these other things. So a big chunk of what we're doing is just trying to educate people that Elastic's more than just enterprise search. And we have these two other offerings that are very capable and are in use by some of the biggest biggest companies in the world, ingesting petabytes of onto Elastic's platform alone. We're several petabytes a day ingestion for our customers. So we know big data. We've got our fingers in some of the biggest data streams on the planet. Those are the ones that we know about because we're the #1 tool in use by 3-letter agencies around the government complexes as well. A giant one right here in our backyard is one of the biggest customers of Elastic that no one can ever talk about. One using a lot of water. The one using a lot of water. Oh, yeah. It's why all our laws are.
It's a big concrete building on the other side of it.
Yeah, out trade. No one knows.
Yeah.
All right, any other last questions?
All right. Well, thank you guys. Feel free to talk to each other. Make sure you get his contact because he's local.